The first time Trevor tested my boundaries, he laughed like it was a joke. And I laughed too, even though my stomach dropped. It happened on a random Tuesday night, the kind where nothing memorable is supposed to happen. I remember because I was halfway through reheating leftover pasta when he walked into the kitchen shirtless, fresh from the shower, towel slung low on his hips like he didn't even notice it was there. "Dude," I said, turning back to the microwave. "You ever heard of a shirt?" Trevor snorted. "Relax, Kevin. You've seen worse at the gym." That was Trevor in a nutshell. Confident, loud, effortlessly straight. The kind of guy who talked about girls like they were a sport and never once questioned himself. He reminded people of that. "Actually, I'm straight," he'd say, unprompted, like it was a brand slogan. We'd been roommates for about 8 months by then. Met through a mutual friend who swore we'd get along because we were both chill. What that really meant was that we both paid rent on time and didn't leave dishes in the sink long enough to grow new ecosystems. At first, he was just Trevor, my straight roommate. Annoying sometimes, funny most of the time, always bringing different girls over, always walking around like he owned every room he entered. I never planned on being attracted to him. I definitely never planned on noticing things, like how he leaned in too close when he talked, or how his voice dropped when it was just the two of us, or how he started finding excuses to sit next to me instead of across the room. The pasta dinged. I grabbed it, turned around, and almost ran straight into him. Trevor was closer than he needed to be. Way closer. "Jesus," I muttered, stepping back. "Personal space." He raised his hands like I'd accused him of a crime. "What?" "I was just seeing if you were going to offer me some." I rolled my eyes. "You never offer me your food." "That's different. I like my food." He grinned. That stupid, crooked grin that always made people forgive him for everything. Then he reached past me to grab a fork from the drawer, his arm brushing against my side. It was quick, probably accidental, but my brain lit up like it had been waiting for an excuse. Trevor didn't move away. Instead, he looked down at where his arm touched me, then back up at my face. There was a beat. Just one. Too long to be nothing. "Wow," he said, amused. "You're tense." "I'm not," I said immediately. He smirked. "Sure you are." And then, because Trevor never knew when to stop, he poked my side. I jerked away. "What the hell?" He laughed, full-on laughed, like he'd just won something. "Dude, relax. You're jumpy tonight." I didn't answer. I just went back to the counter, pretending my heart wasn't doing something weird and loud in my chest. That should have been it. A dumb moment. A nothing interaction. But after that night, things shifted. Not dramatically. Not in a way I could point to and say this is where it started. It was subtler than that. Trevor started hanging around more when I was home, sitting on the arm of the couch instead of his chair, leaning over my shoulder when I was on my laptop. Once, while we were watching a movie, he stretched and casually draped his arm along the back of the couch, behind me. Not touching, just there. "You good with this?" he asked, eyes still on the screen. "With what?" He glanced at me, eyebrows raised, like he was waiting to see how I'd react. I shrugged. "It's your couch." "Cool," he said, settling in. I spent the rest of the movie hyper-aware of every inch of space between us. The thing was, he never crossed a line outright. Everything came with plausible deniability. A joke, a laugh, a "don't be weird about it, Kevin" kind of energy. And maybe that was the smartest part, because it made me question myself instead. One night, after a few beers, he asked me something out of nowhere. "So," Trevor said, staring into his bottle, "you ever think about boundaries?" I nearly choked. "What?" He shrugged. "Like, how people decide what's okay and what's not." I laughed too fast. "That's kind of random." "Yeah," he said slowly, eyes flicking to me. "But interesting." There was something in his tone I couldn't place. Not drunk. Not joking. Curious. He took another sip, then added casually, "I mean, some stuff only feels weird if you make it weird, right?" I didn't answer right away. Trevor watched me like he already knew I was going to say something honest, and that scared me more than if he'd been flirting outright. Because whatever game he was playing, I had a feeling he was just getting started, and I wasn't sure I wanted him to stop. By the end of that week, I was exhausted, not physically, but mentally. Trevor hadn't done anything. That was the problem. Nothing concrete enough for me to call out. Nothing obvious enough to shut down without sounding paranoid. Just little moments that stacked on top of each other until I felt like I was constantly bracing for something. He started knocking on my door at night. Not late, just late enough to feel intentional. Kev, he said one evening, leaning against the frame like he owned it. You busy? I glanced up from my phone. Depends. What do you want? Company. He smirked. And maybe to steal your Netflix. I hesitated, then shrugged. Sure. He came in and flopped onto my bed like it was second nature. Shoes off, arms behind his head, staring at my ceiling. You ever notice, he said casually, your bed's way comfier than mine? That's because you bought the cheapest mattress known to man. Still, he shifted slightly, his knee brushing my thigh. Feels cozy. There it was again. That word. Cozy. Like we were a couple joking about domestic nonsense instead of two grown men who definitely weren't supposed to be sharing this kind of space. I scooted a little farther away. Not dramatically, just enough to breathe. Trevor noticed. He always noticed. What? He asked, glancing sideways at me. Nothing. He rolled onto his side, propping his head up with one hand. You say nothing a lot when it's clearly something. I laughed nervously. Since when are you this observant? Since I started paying attention. That sent a weird chill through me. We watched an episode in silence after that, but I couldn't focus. Every time he moved, my body reacted before my brain could catch up. Every stretch, every sigh, every lazy shift closer. At one point, his hand landed palm down on the bed between us. Close enough that if I moved an inch, our fingers would touch. He didn't pull away. Neither did I. After the episode ended, Trevor didn't get up. Instead, he stared at the paused screen, jaw tight like he was thinking hard about something. Can I ask you something? He said. My stomach dropped. That depends. He smirked faintly, but there was tension behind it. You ever feel like people put you in a box? I frowned. What kind of box? Like, he said slowly. They decide who you are before you even get a say. I chose my words carefully. Yeah, I think most people do. He nodded. Yeah, exactly. Then he turned to me fully. We were way too close now. I could see the faint scar on his eyebrow. The one he said came from a stupid high school dare. So, he continued, voice lower. What happens if you step outside that box? I swallowed. You mean hypothetically? Sure, he said. Hypothetically. There it was. The test. I shrugged. I guess you find out who's real and who's not. Trevor held my gaze for a long second. Something unreadable passed through his eyes. Huh, he said softly. Then, like always, he broke the moment first. He laughed, sat up, and slapped his hands on his thighs. Damn, that got deep. I should probably go before I start sounding like I'm in therapy. He stood, stretched, and headed for the door. Just before leaving, he glanced back. Oh, he added, casual again. You don't mind if I crash in here sometime, right? Like if I've had too much to drink or whatever. My heart started racing. I mean, sure, if you need. His smile widened. Cool. Good to know. When the door closed behind him, I lay back on my bed and stared at the ceiling, replaying every second. He wasn't flirting. Not exactly. He wasn't confessing. He wasn't crossing lines. He was probing. And the worst part? Every time he pushed, some part of me leaned forward instead of pulling away. I told myself I was being ridiculous. That Trevor was straight. That he'd said it 100 times. That guys like him didn't suddenly change because of late-night conversations and shared space. But deep down, I knew something else was going on. Because the next morning, I woke up to find him already in my room, sitting on the edge of my bed. And this time, he hadn't knocked. I bolted upright so fast I nearly headbutted him. What the hell, Trevor? I said, clutching my blanket to my chest like it offered protection from whatever this was. He didn't look surprised. If anything, he looked amused. Calm. Like this was completely normal. Relax, he said. You were snoring. I do not snore. He grinned. You absolutely do. Soft though. Kinda impressive. I groaned and scrubbed my face. Dude, you can't just come into my room. He tilted his head. Why not? The question landed heavier than it should have. Because, I said, sitting up properly now, boundaries. There it was. The word he'd brought up himself days earlier. Trevor nodded slowly, like he'd been waiting for me to say it. Right. Boundaries. He didn't move. Still sitting there. Still way too close. So, he continued, this is one of yours. Yes, I said immediately. Very much so. He studied me, eyes tracing my face like he was memorizing it. Then he surprised me by standing up. Okay, he said easily. Got it. He headed for the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. For what it's worth, he added, not turning around. You don't need to freak out every time I'm near you. I'm not gonna jump you or anything. Heat rushed to my face. I wasn't freaking out. He glanced back, eyebrow raised. Kevin, please. Then he left. I spent the rest of the day trying to convince myself that nothing weird had happened. That Trevor was just being Trevor. That this was all in my head. But the thing about boundaries is, you notice them most right after someone touches one. That evening, we ended up alone in the apartment. No girls. No friends. Just the hum of the fridge and some random game playing on the TV. Trevor sprawled across the couch, like always. I sat on the opposite end. Safe distance. Intentional. Halfway through the game, he spoke without looking at me. You know I've never done anything with a guy. My heart slammed against my ribs. Okay, I said carefully. I mean, he continued, still staring at the screen. I've thought about stuff. Everyone has. But I've never actually crossed that line. I didn't respond. I didn't trust my voice. He finally turned to look at me. You're good at this. At what? Not reacting, he said. Most people jump in with assumptions. You just let things be. I swallowed. Maybe I just don't assume anything. He smiled at that. A softer one this time. Less cocky. That's kinda why I feel comfortable around you. The words wrapped around my chest tighter than they had any right to. Then, casual as breathing, he shifted closer. Not all the way. Just enough that our legs brushed. I tensed. He noticed. Of course he did. Hey, he said quietly. I'm not doing anything. I know. Then why are you pulling away? I stared straight ahead. Because you keep saying things like that. Like what? Like you're circling something you don't want to admit. I said before I could stop myself. Silence. Trevor leaned back, exhaling slowly. And what if I'm just curious? I turned to him then. Really looked at him. Curiosity still affects people, I said. Especially when they're the ones being tested. Something shifted in his expression. The teasing faded. The confidence cracked just a little. I don't want to mess you up, he said quietly. My chest tightened. Then stopped pushing. He nodded. Okay. But he didn't move away. Instead, he rested his arm along the back of the couch again. Not touching me. Giving me space. Choice. And somehow, that was harder. Because when my shoulder leaned into his arm a minute later, he didn't react at all. He just let it happen. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. Trevor wasn't crossing my boundaries anymore. He was waiting to see if I'd cross my own. After that night, things got quieter. Not less intense, just quieter. Trevor stopped making comments that hovered on the edge of something else. No more late-night philosophy questions. No more casually invading my space like he was daring me to react. If anything, he overcorrected. He asked before sitting next to me. Knocked every time. Gave me space like he was trying to prove a point. To me or to himself, I wasn't sure. And that should have made things easier. Instead, it made everything worse. Because now I was the one noticing the distance. The empty space on the couch. The way he'd stop himself mid-joke and glance at me like he was checking for permission. The way he hesitated before touching my arm when he laughed, then pulled back. I hated how much that bothered me. One Friday night, a few beers deep, we ended up on the balcony. City lights, cool air, that buzzed but not drunk feeling that makes honesty feel inevitable. Trevor leaned on the railing, bottle dangling from his fingers. Can I ask you something without you overthinking it? I scoffed. You're asking the wrong person. He smirked, then grew serious. Did I mess things up? My chest tightened. With what? With us, he said, then quickly added, as roommates. Friends. Whatever. I took a sip, buying time. You didn't mess anything up. He studied me. That wasn't a yes. I sighed. You confused me. He nodded, like he'd already accepted that. Yeah, same. We stood there in silence for a moment, the city humming below us. I've always known who I'm supposed to be, he said finally. Straight guy? Easy. No questions. No complications. I glanced at him. And now, he said quietly, I keep wanting to see how far something goes before I decide what it means. My pulse picked up. That's dangerous. For who? For both of us, I said. Because you get to experiment. I get to deal with the aftermath. That landed. I could tell by the way his jaw clenched. I never wanted to use you, he said. I know, I replied. But intention doesn't change impact. He turned to face me fully. Then tell me where the line is. The question hung between us, heavy and real. I looked at him, really looked at him. No jokes. No bravado. Just Trevor, uncertain for once. The line, I said slowly. is that I won't be your test run. He nodded. Okay. And I added, heart pounding, I won't be the one pushing either. Something shifted in his eyes. Relief? Respect? Maybe both. So, he said, trying for lightness, we just exist? I smiled faintly. We exist. He bumped his shoulder gently against mine. Not testing. Not lingering. Just there. And somehow, that felt bigger than anything he'd done before. Because for the first time, Trevor wasn't pretending he was totally straight. And for the first time, I wasn't pretending I didn't care. We existed for about 2 weeks. And somehow, that was the hardest part. Nothing happened, which meant everything could. Trevor was careful now. Almost too careful. He still joked, still laughed, still filled the apartment with his presence. But there was a restraint to him that hadn't been there before. Like he'd put his hands in his pockets to stop himself from reaching for something. Or someone. The tension didn't disappear. It just changed shape. One night, I came home late from work and found him in the living room. Lights low, TV off, just sitting there scrolling on his phone. You okay? I asked, dropping my bag. He looked up. Yeah, just thinking. That was becoming a theme. I went to the kitchen, grabbed a beer, then, after a second of hesitation, tossed one to him. Want to talk it out? I asked. He caught it, surprised. You offering? I'm asking. He considered me for a long moment, then patted the spot next to him on the couch. This time he waited. I sat, not touching, close enough to feel his body heat, far enough to pretend it was coincidence. I spent time with a girl last night, he said suddenly. The words hit harder than I expected. Oh, I said. Okay. Just so you know, he added quickly. I'm not telling you to make you feel weird. I laughed softly. Too late. He winced. Yeah, fair. I took a sip, eyes on the bottle. And I couldn't stop thinking about how different it felt, he admitted. I looked at him. Different how? He shrugged. Easy. Familiar. But empty. That made my chest ache in a way I didn't like. Trevor, I said carefully. This is exactly what I meant. I know, he said. I know. I'm not asking you to fix anything. I just needed to say it out loud. Silence settled between us. Not awkward. Heavy. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Do you ever wish people came with instructions? I huffed a laugh. Daily. He smiled, then glanced at me. Can I ask you something kind of selfish? I hesitated. Depends. Will you tell me if I'm crossing a line? He asked. Not after. Not politely. Just right when it happens. My heart started racing. Why? Because I don't trust myself to know anymore, he said honestly. I nodded slowly. Okay. He exhaled, like he'd been holding that breath for a while. We sat there for a few minutes, shoulders almost touching. I could feel the tension humming again. Quiet, controlled, but alive. Then his hand moved. Not toward me. Not even close. He just rested it on the cushion between us. Open. Still. An invitation without pressure. My pulse thundered in my ears. This time, I was the one who shifted closer. Barely. Enough that our thighs touched. Trevor froze. He didn't look at me. Didn't move his hand. You okay? He asked softly. Yes, I said, voice steady despite everything. Are you? He nodded once. Yeah. Our legs stayed pressed together. No rush. No escalation. Just warmth. Awareness. Choice. And in that moment, I understood something clearly for the first time. Trevor wasn't totally straight anymore, not because of what he'd done, but because of what he was allowing himself to feel. And I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was choosing. The first time Trevor crossed a boundary again, it wasn't physical. It was emotional, and somehow, that felt riskier. It happened late one night when I was half asleep on the couch, lights off, TV murmuring in the background. I felt the cushion dip before I opened my eyes. You awake? He asked quietly. Barely, I muttered. Good, he said. Then you can stop me if this is dumb. I turned my head toward him. He was sitting closer than earlier that night, knees angled toward me, elbows resting on his thighs like he'd rehearsed this conversation 100 times and still didn't know how to start. I keep thinking about what you said, he continued. About not being someone's test run. My chest tightened. Trevor. I know, he cut in gently. I'm not asking for that. I swear. I waited. He took a breath. I just need to know if the reason this feels complicated is because of me, or because you actually feel something too. There it was. No jokes. No deflection. I sat up slowly. That's not a fair question. I know, he said immediately. but I need an honest answer. I studied him, really studied him. The nervous energy he tried so hard to hide. The way his confidence cracked when this wasn't about control or certainty. Yes, I said finally. I feel something. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. But, I added, holding up a finger, that doesn't mean I'm okay being the place you figure yourself out. I get that, he said quickly. I'm not trying to rush into anything. I just needed to know I wasn't imagining it. You weren't. Silence fell again, but it felt different this time. Softer, charged in a new way. Trevor leaned back, staring at the ceiling. This is messing with my head. Welcome to my world, I said lightly. He laughed, then turned to me. Can I say something really honest? I nodded. I'm scared, he admitted. Not of you. Of what this says about me. I swallowed. You don't have to define anything right now. Yeah, he said, but I don't want to pretend either. That word, pretend, hung heavy between us. Slowly, deliberately, he reached out and rested his hand over mine. Not gripping, not pulling, just there. I didn't move. You good? He asked quietly. Yes, I said, but this means something. I know, he replied. That's why I'm doing it. We stayed like that for a long time. No rush, no escalation, just warmth and intention and the quiet understanding that something real was forming, whether either of us was ready to name it or not. Eventually, he squeezed my hand once, gently, then let go. I'm gonna head to bed, he said, standing. Thanks for not shutting me out. Thanks for asking instead of assuming, I replied. He smiled at that. A real one, not the cocky Trevor grin. Something softer, more vulnerable. As he walked away, I realized something important. Trevor wasn't just testing boundaries anymore. He was learning how to respect them. And somehow, that made me want him more, not less. Things didn't explode after that. They settled. And that scared me more than tension ever had. Trevor didn't suddenly become someone else. He didn't wake up and announce a revelation. He didn't touch me more, or talk less, or pretend that moment on the couch hadn't mattered. He just showed up differently. He asked how my day was, and actually listened. He remembered small things. The coffee I liked. The deadline I was stressed about. He stopped bringing random girls over, not with an announcement, just quietly, like it wasn't something he needed to prove anymore. One night, while we were cooking together, I caught him watching me. Not checking me out. Not zoning out. Just looking. What? I asked. He blinked. Nothing. Just thinking how weird this all is. I smiled. In a bad way? He shook his head. No. Just different. Later that night, we sat on the couch again. Same spot. Same distance. That intentional almost touch between us that had started to feel familiar. I told my buddy I might be moving out when the lease is up, he said suddenly. My stomach dropped. Oh, not because of you, he added quickly. Because of me. I turned to face him. What does that mean? It means, he said slowly, I don't want to keep pretending I'm totally straight just because it's easier. And I don't want you stuck in the middle of that. I searched his face. So what do you want? He met my eyes. I want to figure this out without hiding behind jokes or labels. And if something happens between us, I want it to be because I chose it, not because I drifted into it. My chest tightened. In a good way. A scary way. And if nothing happens? I asked. He smiled softly. Then I still respect the hell out of you. We sat there, the weight of possibility hanging in the air. Slowly, I reached for his hand. Not dramatic. Not rushed. He stilled, but didn't pull away. You okay? I asked. He nodded. Yeah, I am. Our fingers intertwined naturally, like they'd always known how. Trevor squeezed my hand once, grounding, steady. I'm not totally straight, he said quietly, almost to himself. Then he looked at me, and I think I stopped being that the moment I started caring if I crossed your boundaries. I smiled. Funny, that's when I started trusting you. We didn't kiss that night. We didn't need to. Because whatever this was, it wasn't a test anymore. It was a choice. And for the first time, we were making it together.